from the capital of the Lone Star State. Welcome back to the Elephant Herd.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Elephant Herd, the official podcast of the Republican Party of Texas. New face, new name here. My name is James Wesolek. I am the comms director for the Republican Party of Texas, and I am joined by Chad Shoemake, our political director.
Yep.
So we'll be here bringing you updates from the Republican Party of Texas. As we dive into session, we'll be talking more about our legislative priorities, what's going on. We look forward to having future guests in to talk about what they're doing as well. But as we get started here, session has just begun. Normally this week is rather ceremonial with things, but there was some excitement that happened this time around. So Chad, can you tell us what was going on?
This week is actually the most fun part of legislative session, in my opinion, if you're a nerd.
Yeah, you got to be deep in
Like
the
me.
weeds and parliamentarian nerd and everything else.
Yeah, this is just like the Super Bowl for some of us, right? On the Senate side, it's the boring part, right? I think all they did was draw straws to see who runs and for a 2-year term and a 4-year term after redistricting and whatnot, just to see, because they don't all run at the same time, similar like the House does.
Mm-hmm.
But the House, there was a lot of interesting precedent that was set last week. We had a housekeeping resolution, which is H.R. 3 proposed by Will Metcalf. Typically, that is the ceremonial part, right? We saw an increase in office budget to combat inflation for some of the staff, which is, take that with what you will, but it's
Staffers work hard too.
Some,
yes,
right? But it was an interesting week. The housekeeping resolution included a portion of state resources cannot be used for political purposes, right? And looking at that from the outside is, political purposes for state resources, we don't want our folks campaigning with state money, right? Well, I don't think that was the exact intention of it, and we'll get into what exactly happened.
Because at an initial reading, right, that's exactly what it is we don't want taxpayer dollars, which is how these people are paid through our tax dollars, to be used for campaigns or other blatant political things. And it's a good rule if that's your understanding of it.
If that is how it is used, right? And it's in the Constitution. There are rulings made, opinions made from the Attorney General, from Abbott, even back whenever he was Attorney General, from John Cornyn. But obviously we had the no Democrat chair kind of debate. So after we had the housekeeping resolution, and this is what I'm talking about for the parliamentary nerds. If you know anything about parliamentary procedure, you know that the highest form of highest motion, the highest privileged motion, is a motion to adjourn. Well, as a lot of our listeners know, we had a huge rally the next day.
Plan for the next day.
And the House decided, well, we're going to hear the rules today instead, right? And whether or not that was decided, beforehand or whatever, take that with what you will, but there was a motion made to adjourn. And like I was saying before, the motion to adjourn is the most privileged motion a person can make on the floor, and that was denied, setting a brand new precedent of, I guess you can just not make a motion to adjourn if you'd like.
Is the Texas House whose line is it anyway, where the rules are made up and the bills don't matter?
Right, exactly. Well, it goes with the longstanding precedent of some members are more equal than others, right?
Right.
But the motion to adjourn was made by Representative Slayton, and he just wasn't recognized to make that motion. That motion can be made wherever you want. Saying that you can't make that motion is like saying you don't need a majority vote to pass a bill, right? It's just absurd.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a odd precedent that was set. But going further into the day, obviously they did hear the rules laid out by Representative Todd Hunter. The rules were pretty much the same. There wasn't any changes. They did away with some of the COVID emergency, and they just made it just an emergency plan, which is understandable because who knows what's going to happen in the future, right? There might very well be an emergency, and what's the plan for it? But Amendment number 3 by Representative Slayton, the infamous No Democrat Chair Amendment, was unfortunately killed on a technicality.
Yeah, so explain this a little bit, because, again, this is in the weeds parliamentary nerd stuff. So let's, before we get into no Democrat chairs, let's back up a little bit. There was Representative Hunter made an adjustment, or I guess the technical term is an amendment, to the rules to punish those who break quorum.
Right.
Which we discovered last time became necessary.
Yep.
So let's talk about that briefly, then we'll go back to the no Democrat chairs amendment.
Sure. I mean, I like it. It's fine. I'm happy that it was incorporated, but in my humble opinion, this was already allowed, right? These procedures were already in place, and to be frank, they weren't really utilized, right? My biggest take with this issue is that in order to utilize them, you have to have a quorum. You still have to have a quorum to do these things, and if you're breaking quorum, this is really just an incentive to not go back home.
Yeah, so that's a key point. There's a couple key points here that Chairman Rinaldi has talked about, and that we'll recap here. So you break quorum. When you come back, which obviously is the goal, and you can do that. Members can do that voluntarily or by force.
Yep.
They can be arrested and brought back. Then the punishment is a separate vote from whether or not once they come back. So as to your point, there's an incentive not to come back, because now I have to take a vote on whether or not I get a spanking.
Right.
Which we all know how that would necessarily go. Although Republicans are in the majority, so you would hope that would be different. So there's nothing automatic here that happens. You break the rules, this penalty is implied. It's you break the rules, and we have to vote on this penalty, which brings us back to what happened with trying to. I keep wanting to say motion to vacate, because that's been all in the news, but it wasn't motion to vacate. It was a motion to adjourn, and how that was denied. What would happen if a member brought up a motion to punish these quorum breakers? Would that be recognized?
Well, they would have to be recognized as the thing, right? So, like a motion to adjourn, you really don't need recognition. You can just go up and make the motion. This motion to just say, I want to punish these folks, you would have to be recognized by the speaker. So really, it's at the determination of whether or not does the speaker want to do this.
So, so that's what it comes down to, is we have to come back, we have to vote on it. But before we can even vote on it, we have to be recognized by the speaker to make this motion. Mm-hmm. That can cause problems.
Yep.
Things to watch out for. I don't think another quorum break happens.
And I'd be surprised if they tried it again, because it just flopped so miserably for them last time. But you never know. These same people are saying that like Texas is going to turn blue every cycle,
every 2 years. Yeah.
Load up their consultants with more money.
Right.
Right. So I'm not saying that they're the most strategic.
Right. So not everything bad in the rules. Some good things could have been better.
Yep.
But some good things. So now we come to the amendment process, where we were trying to put into the rules an amendment that colloquially has been referred to as no Democrat committee chairs. Mm-hmm. But the text of the amendment actually talked about how members of, if whatever party is in the majority, there cannot be members of the party in the minority in committee chairs.
Right.
So if for whatever reason Texas does turn blue, this would backfire, so to speak, on Republicans. It wasn't a political thing. It was strictly a majority versus minority thing.
Yeah.
That amendment was offered, and what happened?
Yeah, and just to go back a little bit, I don't even think it would backfire, because the Democrats, if they had control of the House, they wouldn't even need this amendment.
Yeah, they would do it naturally.
They would just do it naturally, because they are naturally wanting to push an agenda in their chamber that they would control, and that's where we are kind of losing, right? The amendment was brought forth by Representative Slayton. Then Representative Charlie Guerin from Fort Worth came and called a point of order on the amendment. And let me just preface this with,
And let's explain a point of order, too.
yeah, and a point of order is a procedural tactic that you can kill an amendment or a bill on a technicality. So
You're saying that basically by bringing a point of order, you're saying that this bill, this amendment, violates the rules and cannot be discussed.
correct.
Yep.
Correct. So, I mean, like, and make no mistake, this point of order, this point of order has been planned out for a long time.
Yeah.
This was 100% intentional.
We have not been coy about our intentions on our
Right,
Democrat committee
exactly.
chairman.
And neither is Representative Slayton. He said from the day after last session of the rules debate, I'm going to bring this again and we're going to have another vote on it. Because remember, initially, the first time that we got a vote was last session, and I think it only got like 5 votes. Only 5 Republicans supported it, and then it became a pretty much a
big
center
campaign issue. It became a legislative priority for us at convention. It was massive.
Yeah.
The delegates, the grassroots. Last session, I think everyone knew that the practice was going on, but they didn't know how bad it was and that we had the power to change it.
Yep.
And a lot has changed in the 2 years in that intervening
Know
time.
what was happening.
A lot of people still don't know it's happening.
I mean, you go, I go home to Victoria County, and you talk about it over there, and they're just like, there's just no way. Imagine if Kevin McCarthy came up as speaker, and I'm the speaker, I'm gonna make AOC a chair of ethics, right? Like it's.
I mean, I was talking to people in the Capitol on Tuesday, swearing in day, and there were some folks there wearing T-shirts that said "Ban Democrat chairs," and folks were asking. I had a button on my backpack, and folks were asking, "What is this all about?" And when I explained to them what was going on, they were shocked.
Yeah. So I mean, on this, and point of orders can be very complicated, right? There's a lot of precedent that
Highly
goes in,
technical things.
Highly technical. I'm no lawyer, and I barely understand it. It's like this whole ordeal, right? With the point of orders and how stuff is just killed, and the grassroots are just what the heck, right? And it's made that way for a purpose. It is confusing for a purpose, right? Just so we have an out is how I see it.
Okay.
And so you look at the ruling, and the ruling pretty much says, the housekeeping resolution said that we cannot use staff or public resources to fulfill a issue that is a directive from a state executive committee of a political party. So public resources cannot be used for political purposes.
So we've taken the heart of that rule, as we discussed, to keep taxpayer dollars out of campaigns and special interests, monies, and political things.
Yeah.
And they have twisted it to say, because a political party has spoken about this issue, it is now political, and we're not able to use House staff, resources, and time addressing it.
Right. And essentially what they were saying is, well, we can't use public resources to determine who's a Republican and who's a Democrat. Like, really? The state Republican Executive Committee has said that this is a legislative priority for their political party. If we pass this, we are fulfilling a directive of them. They're a political instrumentality, so this is a political purpose that we're passing this, so we can't hear it. Essentially what they just did was, 1, vote themselves out of existence, because everything that happens in that chamber is political.
I was going to say.
And 2, that means that they will never be able to hear a single legislative priority, and they broke the rules last time.
Of Republicans or Democrats,
Of Republicans or Democrats. And they broke the rules last time. But see, here, just going back to just how teed up this was, okay? There's some smart people in the chamber. The parliamentarians are very smart. The speaker's smart. But here's the thing. They cited precedent from 110 years ago to kill this amendment.
So someone had done a lot of research.
Someone had done a lot of research, and they teed it up. We're going to put this in the housekeeping resolution. We're going to, hopefully, the same language is brought, which the language is sound, the way that it's written right now.
The language of the amendment. Okay.
And then I have this precedent from 110 years ago that says that you can't conflict with a resolution of housekeeping and the rules, which is just, one, the purpose of the housekeeping resolution and the amendment that was added there is just to try to conflate the two is just completely bogus. But also referring to a political party as a political instrumentality and not, what did they have? A public entity, which is duh. But, that doesn't mean that the legislature can no longer hear things from an institution that they also regulate.
Right.
Okay.
And so Chairman Rinaldi said this on Twitter, right, where, look, we're just bumpkins, right? We're not lawyers. We're not parliamentarian nerds. We find it interesting. But someone had said on Twitter, is like, did the House just, like, rule itself out of existence, essentially? Because as a political body, you can imagine that they would do political things. And the ruling was, you can't do political things.
Do political things. No politics is to happen in this political chamber. It's like, even there was even an amendment that was brought forward. On the House video feed, whenever a member speaking, it'll have their name and their district number. It'll indicate whether
just to identify who they are for the layman.
Yeah. So we wanted to go a step further, and I would love to see this, like Republican or Democrat under there. Because we went a step further in Congress and did it, right?
Yeah.
So why not?
When you watch C-SPAN, it shows Representative whoever, where they're from, and what party they're affiliated with.
Well, we can't do that because those are political.
That's political instrumentalities.
We're all political instrumentalities in this. So
it's not just amendments that can be political instrumentalities. People can be political instrumentalities.
Chad Shoemake is a political instrumentality. I'm an instrument. It's just, but
I suppose that makes you banned from the House now.
I'm banned from the House, yeah. But one thing, a really great point was brought up right after that by Representative Matt Schaefer. He went to the back mic and asked a parliamentary inquiry as to, does the House Republican caucus constitute a political instrumentality? So we're talking...
The chair is not advised.
The chair is not advised, and that's not a proper parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the thing. In the same breath of this housekeeping resolution, how they say that public resources cannot go to fund political resources. In the same breath, if you scroll down, it literally mandates that House administration must give a parking pass to the House Republican caucus and the House Democrat caucus. The chair of each caucus can have these resources within the Capitol grounds. Okay, like a printer or a telephone or a computer. That's electricity that's paid for by state taxpayers.
So,
and Matt Schaefer went up there and asked, "Is this a political instrumentality?" I'm not advised. Yes,
right.
It 100% is.
So a political instrumentality cannot make recommendations to the Texas House, but that same political instrumentality, well, not the same, a different political instrumentality can get a special parking spot.
Well, but the best part of it is that the House Republican caucus issues vote recommendations on the House floor. So actually, it's rules for thee and not for me.
So it is entirely possible, based upon the House caucus's rules recommendations, and I would assume that the Democrat caucus would make similar recommendations, that any member at any time, if the rules are enforced fairly, which I realize is a big if, they can come forward, call a point of order, claim that this rule is a political instrumentality, and the Texas House would pass nothing.
They don't exist.
It's all possible.
They're not real. We only have a Senate.
It will be interesting to see how this plays out.
And like I said at the start, we set some interesting precedent last week. We set a precedent of making rulings on a constitutional point of order. And for, a point of order is typically made on the rules, okay, by the rules. But there was a constitutional point of order, and that's almost unheard of. The speaker has opted to not make rulings on the constitutional point of orders, and it's interesting that that day was the day to start. It was just an odd. Is
normally a day of pomp and circumstance, but for the legislative nerd, which we proudly count ourselves amongst, a lot of very interesting things happened.
Yep.
So because of all of this, we went out and bought some radio in Speaker Phelan's district. And by bought radio, let me phrase this for those who don't understand the lingo here. We bought advertising time, we as the Republican Party of Texas, to alert Speaker Phelan's constituents of his desire and intention, which he has publicly stated, to appoint Democrats as committee chairs. During the Republican primary, statewide, it was 81% of Republican voters said they didn't want Democrat chairs. In Speaker Phelan's home district, it was 85%. So we bought some radio advertisement to let those folks know. Because now that the rules are set, Speaker Phelan is the only person who can set committee chairs. And the rules don't bar him from appointing Democrat committee chairs, but he could still choose not to appoint Democrat committee chairs and do the right thing.
Similar to like what the Democrats would do if they were in control right now.
Yes, they don't need a rule. They can just
They don't need a rule.
do what's right. And so we placed some radio advertisement in Beaumont for Speaker Phelan's district. Those are, at the time we're recording this, those are running right now. They'll run for about 2 weeks, just to let his constituents know. We encourage anyone to especially if you're a constituent of Speaker Dave Phelan, to let your representatives know. Even if Speaker Phelan isn't your constituent, at this point, he's the only one who can stop it. So you can still call him. You can still reach out to your member of the State House, encourage them to speak with Speaker Phelan about this. It's not too late to stop this. Just because we lost the rules fight doesn't mean that our elected officials can't do the right thing without being mandated to.
Right. Especially, I mean, we lost the rules fight on a bogus technicality. That was the ruling, to be fair, came from him.
Came from Speaker Phelan.
You know, so it's he presides over a chamber that has statewide impact, you know, and repercussions. It's not just his district that's being affected by it.
Yep.
It's everyone's. And his decision on whether or not he's going to appoint chairman of the majority political party, the folks that won in November, you know, it's up to him.
And let's keep in mind, we started talking about some of the good things that happened with the rules where the quorum breaking provision was added back in. We still have not seen any punishment for the majority of the Democrat caucus who broke quorum last session. Mm-hmm. And many of them were committee chairs. It stands to reason that many of them, if they were committee chairs, could be reappointed as committee chairs.
Yep.
Obviously, we hope that that doesn't happen, but there's nothing to say that that can't happen.
Sure, and you know, if they were to keep to only Democrats that didn't break quorum, that would be better, but that's not saying much.
I mean, it's 3 or 4 people.
It's 3 or 4 people who they're not going to be the ones, you know, we need to pass the RPT legislative priorities in my committee, you know. So it's better than, you know.
It's better than nothing, but it's not what we asked for.
Right, exactly. And again, I think there's like 4.
Yeah. And to clarify, last session there were 14, I believe it was 13 or 14 Democrat committee chairmen. So it was 40% of Texas House committees were chaired by Democrats. So there's a lot of making up to do. Okay, so let's talk about bad bill of the week here.
Yeah.
As we do these podcasts, hopefully weekly, it might be a little bit more than that. One of the things that we want to do is highlight just some egregious legislation that is being brought either before the Texas House or the Texas Senate, and just shine a little light on some of the bad things here to make sure that, you know, with our little flashlight shining on this, that it doesn't see the bigger light of day in a committee somewhere. So what do we have this week?
This one is pretty egregious. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's by Representative Talarico, who was, you know, redistricted into a Republican district and, you know, moved in further into Travis County to make sure that he gets to stay in the swamp. And he brought this bill.
An up-and-coming star in the Texas Democrat Party.
Up-and-coming star in the Democrat caucus for sure. you know, I like to think that he's not going to have any success with this, but I imagine that this bill will be referred to education, and I'll explain in a second. But just a reminder, Pub Ed was chaired by a Democrat last session.
Or it could go to another committee chaired by a Democrat.
Yeah.
And it could see the light of day.
So it's by Representative Tallarico, HB 36.
Ooh, low number.
Low number.
So explain to folks what the significance of a low number is.
Well, I mean, 1 through 20 is the important stuff.
1 through 20 is reserved by leadership for their pet bills.
Those are their pet bills. HB1, SB1 are always the budget. Mm-hmm. Unless you're in a special session, then it'll be this is why we're here bill. Mm-hmm. But
a low number indicates he filed early or had some kind of blessing from someone.
There's no exact meaning to it. It just means his staff was sitting there spamming refresh whenever bill filing opened, essentially, is what it is. They woke up at 6 a.m. and they were ready to file the bill, just spamming. Just
ready to go. So they've been waiting on this one for a while.
They've been waiting for this one's been in the hopper for a while. But this bill is egregious and sensitive. What it does essentially is it goes through where it gives public schools and independent school districts the right to go contract with, local police or sheriff's department or to get a school resource officer. It strikes that from code, working with law enforcement in their schools. And
wait. I want to make sure I'm understanding. It strikes from the Texas code the ability for an independent school district to hire school resource officers.
Right. And more specifically, striking the section of code that is for providing security for the district, including employing school district peace officers, private security, school marshals, and collaborating with local law enforcement agencies, such as entering into a memorandum of understanding for the assignment of school resource officers to schools in the district.
So this bars any independent school district from hiring their own security, working with their local police force, or creating a security force amongst themselves.
Yeah, and you know what it prioritizes over that is social emotional learning. We're going to include developing and implementing programs focused on social emotional learning. Pretty much, i.e., we would love to brainwash your children.
So we're going to...
Instead of protecting them, we would like to indoctrinate them. How about that?
And this bill was presumably written and definitely filed post-Uvalde.
Yep.
Which has its own host of problems and errors. But if I'm understanding this correctly, Representative Tallarico, it was HB 36?
36.
And HB 36 wants to defund school police and instead talk about your feelings.
Yep.
So anyone who thinks that their children are already sitting ducks in Texas schools, rather than investing in and strengthening school security, at the same time, we can bring mental health along with that. Representative Tallarico wants to defund and cancel the police and instead have us talk about our feelings.
Yeah. It's absolutely
bold bill.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I was pretty shocked whenever I read it. I mean, this is pretty low, even for the left, right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
we're the insensitive ones apparently, but I mean, I read this and I'm just like, we're pretty caring.
Yeah, I mean, at least we want armed security in schools.
Yeah. So, HB 36 by Tallarico calls office, tell them to not push this bill at all. This is disgusting.
Bad bill of the week for sure.
Bad bill of the week for sure. I mean, I'm not opposed to bringing it next week as well. It's going to get to
reigning champion.
Yeah, reigning champion.
We might have to do something like that where we just bring in all the bad bills of the week and figure out which is the worst.
Rate them. Like a 1 through 10, like 10, like this is the worst bill I have ever seen. I don't know.
It's not the worst bill I've ever seen, but it's up there.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. Like I've seen a lot of bad bills, but eesh.
Yeah.
Let's take away the officers and put in counselors or something.
Which counselors have their place.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Our school counselors do amazing work. But they're not police officers.
They're not police officers. They're not going to shoot the bad guy that's running into,
Yeah. Oof.
So.
All right. Well, What are we at time-wise here? I'm checking our stuff. Yeah, 30 minutes. That's not bad.
That was 30 minutes.
Yeah. See, before we sat down and hit the record button here, we figured, well, how long can we go on this? There it is, 30 minutes. So,
Talk a lot.
yeah. And that's just 1 week's worth of stuff.
Yeah.
So, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back here hopefully next week. Like I said, we're going to try and do this weekly. But we'll keep you updated on the Elephant Herd, the official podcast of the Republican Party of Texas.
The Elephant Herd is provided by Texas Political Training and Empowerment and the Republican Party of Texas and is not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe to the Elephant Herd. Leave an honest rating. You can get all the links to your favorite podcast listening apps at texasgop.org/podcast.